we're already experiencing climate change. This isn't a future issue. And so there are costs for inaction. We're bearing many of them. And we already have a large responsibility for what's called the social cost of carbon, the generalized cost of our emissions and the lifestyle we've come to lead. And so we're going to pay that bill at some point if we're not already paying that bill as taxpayers.
There's a lot going on in the world, but just because the main conversation focuses on a couple of stories, it doesn't mean all the other stuff that was going on before magically stops. That other stuff includes climate change. Today, Sven Gustafson dives into A20, a plan for his hometown of Ann Arbor to go carbon neutral in a just way by 2030. This is episode 527 of Your Daily Detroit for Monday, June 15th, 2020. I'm Jer Stays. Here are 3 sentences of self-promotion before we get into the show, if you'll bear with me. I wanted to thank our members who make this show possible, including our newest, Majid. Thank you so much for supporting us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. It makes a huge difference around here. All right, take it away, Sven.
It's not all that often that we cover Ann Arbor here on Daily Detroit, but we cannot deny that many interesting things come out of my hometown. Case in point, the city council recently approved a plan to become carbon neutral citywide by 2030. The plan is called A20, and joining us to talk all about it is Ann Arbor's mayor, Christoper Taylor, and Missy Stults. She heads the city's sustainability and innovations office and put a lot of work into the plan. Mayor Taylor and Missy Stults, welcome to Daily Detroit.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Let's start by kind of establishing an understanding. What does it mean for a city to go carbon neutral, first of all? What are we talking about? And also, we're talking about the entire city of 120,000 people, right? Not just the city government.
Yeah, that's right. What that means is that all of our residents, all of our commercial enterprises, all of our institutions are limiting the pollutants that they emit contribute to climate change. And we're going to do as much of that as possible locally. And the things that we can't do locally, we'll look to help and make investments regionally, or we'll look for offsets to help reduce the equivalent for what we can't reduce local. We'll look to offset somewhere else in the community.
Mm-hmm. I think this puts Ann Arbor in pretty rare company, right? I'm not aware of any other cities in Southeast Michigan, certainly, that have established a goal like this.
You're exactly right. And it's something about which we're really excited. We have for years, Ann Arbor had a climate action plan back in 2012, but we really didn't have the funding necessary to really even get started on it. We recently in geologic terms, back in 2017, identified and obtained some millage monies that were coming to the city as a result of a county millage, and we identified and allocated some of those towards affecting our climate action goals. And the result of that was funding for the Office of Sustainability and Innovation and our ability to get off the dime and do what needs to be done. And that is, we've declared a climate emergency here in Ann Arbor, and we've put together, and when I say we in the grandest of sense, Dr. Stults and her team and so many different members of the community, technical experts, organizations, volunteers came together and have developed what really is just an incredibly detailed, thoughtful, forward-thinking, and flexible plan. And it's something about which we're super excited.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the specifics. You're targeting the elimination of 2.1 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. That's based on the calculations that you've made for what Ann Arbor was responsible back in 2018. And then you've set out 6 core strategies, including going 100% renewable energy, adopting electric vehicles on a widespread scale, and reducing the miles that people travel in their vehicles by 50%. In your minds, what's going to be the biggest challenges here in terms of pulling off?
I guess, biggest challenges. We've got, there are plenty of challenges, but there's a driving need to meet those challenges, right? And so, a couple of our challenges come from state law. We have the ability to do great things. Cities in other states have more flexibility than we do in the state of Michigan in a number of areas, whether it's with, zoning or deregulating the electricity market. We want to be able to take advantage of all the tools that government has, and we'll need help from the state legislature. So that's obviously an obstacle. Then 2, although so many of the initiatives identified in the plan do have an impressive rate of return, at the same time, they will require financial outlays up front. And so cost, obtaining resources on the upfront, whether it's from the city or from granting partners, that too is a challenge. And finally, I guess I'd say that while we as a community are committed to the goal in the abstract, and achieving the goal in the particulars will be disruptive. And it'll be disruptive in areas of intimacy. It'll be disruptive in areas of transportation. It'll be disruptive in areas of land use. And making sure that we educate our community members so that they understand the connection between where we are and where we need to go and what the goal is and how we get there, that's the important part.
You've mentioned cost a couple times. I do want to come back to that. But what's your argument to skeptics out there? And I'm sure you've got them who would say that this is, essentially going to be a giant laundry list of personal sacrifices that, you're asking people to make at a time when we've spent, 3 months now making extraordinary sacrifices under quarantine because of the coronavirus and everything. I mean, how do you explain that? What's in it for residents?
I guess I'd say a couple of things to that. First off, it's a moral imperative, right? I mean, the climate is changing. If we don't, as a society, change, our names will be cursed by our progeny. Mm-hmm. That should be enough to get people off the dime. Second, although there will be some upfront costs, and Dr. Stults can get more detailed on this, there are cost savings involved. There are equity improvements that we can achieve. I mean, there are quality of life benefits for a wide variety of these initiatives, and so the cost of doing it is nothing versus the cost of not doing it. And that's the case we have to make to residents.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that quickly and say one of the things that we did towards the end too was really pivot the conversation from the cost of implementation to how this is an investment. And that's really true. And that's the mayor's point, very astutely framed, is that the climate's already changing. We're already experiencing impacts. Here locally, we've had a 44% increase in the amount of precipitation that falls every year from where we were 30 years ago. That is a lot of rain. That's the equivalent of 23 more Michigan stadiums full of water falling on our city every year that our system is not designed to handle, right? We're already experiencing climate change. This isn't a future issue. And so there are costs for inaction. We're bearing many of them. And we already have a large responsibility for what's called the social cost of carbon, the generalized cost of our emissions and the lifestyle we've come to lead. And so we're going to pay that bill at some point if we're not already paying that bill as taxpayers. The other thing that I bring into the conversation is, as the mayor said, a lot of these are investments and there'll be savings for people. And where there are costs, we're trying to bundle them with those savings so we have minimal impact. But acknowledging that going back to where we were pre-COVID is actually pretty darn unbearable for a whole lot of people in society. And in particular for our Black, Brown, Indigenous brothers and sisters, they have been disproportionately left out of these equations. And so there's a really huge conversation that needs to happen. And I think reckoning with going back is actually not okay for a lot of people. And also it leads to the status quo of massive climate disruption and continual inequality in our system. And I'm going to guess most of us aren't really excited about that future.
Yeah. Let's talk about that cost now. How much do you think this plan will cost, and where's the money going to come from? And then I also have to ask, because of the strange timing of this, what happens if the coronavirus pandemic blows a hole in the city of Ann Arbor's budget?
Yeah, so the budget right now is estimated to be, assuming we had no dollars whatsoever, about $1 billion. And when you look at that and you break it down, we already have quite a bit of that money in existing city operations, right? We already run a stormwater utility. We already do solid waste pickup. And so often it's enhancing those programs or shifting them slightly. So a number of the dollars that we're seeking already exist. They just have to kind of be shifted slightly. Mm-hmm. Then there is work with partner organizations. We have 71 partners that are nonprofits, institutions, regional municipalities, governance organizations that are offering to help us do this, right? Because it aligns with their mission and their value. So we're leveraging those partners to help lower the cost of implementation. It's fundraising for sure, where we can. And then it's prioritizing other means where we may be able to access resources. Those are kind of the suite of things. And we do have an investment plan. It is one possible way we could fund A20, and it is on the A20 website if people want to take a look at how we're proposing one model of funding this work.
Mayor Taylor, you mentioned possibly needing help from the legislature. Does that include possibly financial assistance from the state?
Well, if the state of Michigan is in the business of accelerating the dollars it hands out to local jurisdictions, we will find a wide variety of quite good things to do for community members. We are going to be looking for state cooperation in this context with respect, say to infrastructure rebuilding, assistance with respect to transportation spends. As we buy vehicles, we'll look for MDOT grants and the like to provide assistance. We're going to look with great particularity for the state to change its building codes. Right now, the building code is not optimized for this purpose. We need to have that change in order to achieve our goal, in order to achieve electrification throughout the built environment. There's a wide variety of changes that we'll need to obtain through the state legislature in order to achieve the goal. And, although it has been a challenge to get things through the legislature in the past, I think there is a growing recognition that this is a moral imperative and that the tools we're asking for are reasonable and properly calibrated to achieve the goal. And it's a goal that we all need to sign up for.
I understand that housing factors into the plan and that there is a desire to, allow for greater density of housing. I followed Ann Arbor politics close enough over the years to know that that's been kind of an ongoing sore point among a lot of residents out there, that there's a real friction between people who want to increase density in Ann Arbor and people who are more comfortable with the kind of single family status quo. How has that issue kind of evolved as the plan was put together and approved?
Well, there's no question that land use is contested ground and probably will be for some time. But the data don't lie. We have 80,000 people that work in the city of Ann Arbor that commute in here every single day. And those 80,000 people, they're not taking their electric vehicles, and they're taking their single occupancy cars, internal combustion engines. And that has a major impact. And it will unless we do something about it. And so, that's one reason within this context why it's important that we do what we can to enable people who work in Ann Arbor to live in Ann Arbor. I'm not saying that we're going to build 80,000 units over the next 10 years, but it's important that we make progress in this regard. And further, I will say, and this is something that Dr. Stults was referencing, is incredibly important to, I know her and her team, and the vision of A20 is the equity component of expanding housing. Many people who work in Ann Arbor want to be able to live in Ann Arbor, but are unable to do so because of affordability. And we know that back in 2015, we were the 8th most segregated county in the country, and there's no reason why that's gonna change, or change for the better. That is, and I'm confident that it's getting worse, and it's getting worse because of housing inequity. It's getting worse because of affordability problems here in the city. And so, as we build units, it's important that we do so in a way that utilizes market forces, utilizes the legal tools that we have to improve affordability.
Dr. Stults, this might be a good question for you. How is the city planning to kind of oversee and run this plan, make sure you're hitting targets, and how much of it is going to need to include kind of ongoing encouragement, promotions, and marketing, frankly?
All of the above. We actually created as part of this was also a governance model. You may have heard, and I think you even referenced this too, that the plan is a living plan. And that is something that sounds really great, but what does it mean in practice? And so we created a governance model that talks about how that plan is going to be revised and what inputs are going to come into the plan. How are we going to, as new ideas emerge, evaluate those ideas to ensure they are held to the same rigor as the actions that are currently in the plan? Because of course things will change. Technology will change. Our societal values may shift. I hope they actually shift a little bit in certain areas. So it had to be living in that way, in that framework. So the governance model outlines how we'll open the plan up, who really has responsibility at different levels for it. I would say the Office of Sustainability and Innovations and the city administrator really are kind of the caretakers of the plan. This is the community's plan. And so there are lots and lots and lots of opportunities to continue engaging with that. That certainly does mean a lot of outreach and engagement. You'll see from us really soon a whole bunch of things like a youth ambassador program. June 22nd, it's a youth climate summit that our youth leaders have organized here and that we're just adding administrative support to. And they're really trying to activate more youth to be part of the solution and making sure youth voices are elevated. We're running a neighborhood ambassador program where your next door neighbor might be the person that actually brings A20 to your neighborhood as opposed to me or someone in my office. So we're really trying to leverage lots of different outlets to effectively have lots of tentacles, trusted advisors in the community who can help bring people into this work because it really is all hands on deck.
So it sounds like really the hard work has barely even begun.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, not to diminish the work that's been done to date, because it's been incredible on a short time frame with a wide array of community input, both from individuals, organizations, activists, and experts. But, it's not completed, and it's not perfect, and we know it, but we are failure friendly. We are innovating, we're iterating, we are committed to getting there, and we know that what we have is imperfect, but we also know that it's the only way to start.
Christoper Taylor is mayor of the city of Ann Arbor. Dr. Missy Stults is the city's sustainability and innovations manager. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Sven, for that, and thanks to you for listening. If this is the first time you're listening to Daily Detroit, be sure to subscribe free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your favorite shows. It's free, and it helps us go up in the rankings, and it means you won't miss another episode. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and talk with you tomorrow.